Welcome to Beer and Bourbon Studios. This is the Game and Drink Connoisseurs podcast. We are your Game and Drink Connoisseurs. I'm Jessica, and this is my co-host / husband, Bryce.
Hey, wife. What's going on?
Aw, nothing much, just recording a podcast.
That's what we do sometimes.
This time, our episode is about Otys, a favorite of ours that doesn't get a lot of love from the internet. It's very underrated, so pretty excited to cover this one on the show.
I'm definitely excited to dive in to this one.
See what you did there?
Yeah, you see what I did there? Yeah.
Let's not keep making a bunch of nautical puns.
Oh yeah, I got you. It took me a second, but I got that one.
Yeah, so Otys is a water world post-apocalyptic adventure. It is an optimization set collector taking place on a Salvage dive, so that's a lot of fun. And then we're pairing it up with Haze Gray coffee by Old Salt Coffee Company. It's a medium dark roast blend, supposed to have a lot of caffeine, so we're gonna dive into both of those today.
I thought you said we weren't doing that anymore.
It happened, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what else is happening in the show today. Along with the Game and Drink, we have some really awesome and in-depth facts as well as history of actual deep-sea salvage diving. That's going to be really cool. And then we close the show off with a tip on how drinking coffee might actually help you live longer.
Well, I'm going to live forever then.
Yeah, no shit. You drink more coffee than anyone I have ever met, ever.
It's in my blood.
At this point, I think it is.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm going to live forever, and I'm a coffee vampire, and you're going to probably die before me, so...
Well, yeah, there you go. Maybe it is the coffee. We'll learn about it at the end of the episode. Like you said, this is a very underrated game. I don't know why, but maybe we can figure that out when we give it a look.
I guess we're going to see.
Okay, so before we ruin the show with any more nautical puns, we have our first glass of Haze Gray coffee by Old Salt in hand. While we sample this, let's take a minute to learn a little more about it.
Haze Gray Medium Roast Coffee is a solid-bodied, highly caffeinated medium to dark roast hybrid made by the Old Salt Coffee Company. Old Salt was founded by retired sailors who have put their passions for the Navy and coffee together with two missions in mind: make terrific roasts and honor the rich and ongoing history of America's Navy, with special regard to the many brave men and women who have and still continue to serve within it. And Old Salt, after all, is an old sailor, dedicated to keeping the history of the sea alive. And whether it's on their YouTube channel, website, social media pages, or their coffee itself, Old Salt has done just that, like no other coffee maker out there. Haze Gray, which takes its name from the color of paint used on Navy ships, uses only the Colombian bean. These beans are best known for their rich oils and full, earthy flavors. Notes of caramel and both milk and dark chocolate are added to give the brew a slight sweetness, not only in taste, but in aroma as well. To add a bit of contrast, Haze Gray roasts their medium beans a tad longer than usual to bring them to a level of medium dark. You may have heard this called an after-dinner or full city roast. This allows those spicy, bright, acidic flavors so prevalent in medium roasts to be grounded, hopefully in a balanced way, within the deep, earthy, and sweet body and flavors so widely associated with dark roasts. One of the most notable aspects about this coffee can be found in its caffeine content. Typically, coffee will lose its caffeine potency the darker you roast it, but Haze Gray is an exception. Old Salt has ensured that this medium dark roast hybrid packs a serious punch. There are a few different ways a roaster can boost the caffeine levels in their darker roasts, although we can't see exactly which technique Old Salt utilizes. However, if you're looking for an extra kick in the teeth, Haze Gray will get the job done, as it is the most caffeinated roast they have to offer, beating out even their lightest roast. Given the body and flavor complexities mixed with the heavy aroma and boosted caffeine content, it's no wonder Old Salt has described their Haze Gray Full City Roast as a slow sipping brew, perfect for your next overnight sea watch, or maybe just your next long night of board gaming. To pick up a bag of Old Salt Haze Gray, visit their online store at oldsaltcoffee.com. While you're there, take some time to learn about America's amazing naval history as well, and find out how this 5-star rated Hawaiian-based coffee company is helping Navy vets around the country through various charities funded in part by coffee lovers like you.
In the mid-22nd century, oceans have engulfed the world. The remaining fragments of humanity survive on the few pieces of land left above sea level. In the Otys colony, you strive to build a future for your people by retrieving the submerged debris of past civilizations. Send your best divers to salvage useful materials. Use your team wisely to fulfill colony contracts, earn rewards, and gain more prestige than the competition. Otys is a 2-4 player Euro-style item management game and can currently be found online for around $22. It plays in around 60 minutes and is recommended for ages 14 and up. So like we mentioned at the top of the show, this is a game that has been pretty much widely overlooked. It didn't get a whole lot of love when it came out in 2017. For whatever reason.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of mentions of this one on any kind of social media posts or board game groups or anything like that.
Didn't see a lot of YouTube videos about it or anything, so hopefully maybe we can change that today. The object in Otys is very simple. Become the most celebrated salvage team on Otys.
The way you do that is to use your diving team strategically to gather resources and complete corporate contracts.
So to start the game, you're going to lay out your colony board. This is going to be the main board that everyone pays attention to throughout the game. You're going to have contract cards. You're going to have a little store where you can buy and sell resources. You're going to have a bunch of different items and resources laid out, batteries and X tokens and credits. We'll talk all about those a little later on. The only setup worth mentioning in great detail right now are your sponsor tiles. You're going to shuffle these things up and you're going to lay them out in a levels 1 through 5 column on the left side of the board.
So once your communal colony board is set up, everybody is going to get their player boards. Each player board is sort of your base of operations. You have your kind of rig there off at the side, and then you can see 8 spaces in a column for your divers. 3 of them are above the surface, and 5 of them, levels 1 through 5, are below. Each of the levels 1 through 5 that are underwater also has a resource storage area and a level tile, which is used to actually activate the divers. So you're going to start the game with one of each of the 4 resources, your full diving team, all of your 5 level tiles, 1 X token, a battery, and 3 credits. You're going to shuffle your diving team before you place them and lay them down in the spaces in columns 1 through 8. Everybody's going to start with a different configuration here because it's randomized. So you don't know who's going to be above the water or below. Once you have your team in place and your 4 resources, which are also randomized, placed on the board, you're ready to begin.
Every one of your turns throughout the game is going to consist of 3 different phases. You have your activate a level and sponsor phase, activate a diver phase, and then a resurface phase. To activate a level, you simply just choose one of your submerged levels, levels 1 through 5 in that column, and that will activate the corresponding sponsor on that same level. So if I slide level 4 over on my board, the sponsor at level 4 on the main board will activate. These sponsors, depending on the sponsor tile, will do an array of different things for you. Some will allow you to activate divers for a lower cost. Others will move things around on the main board. Some of them will allow you to upgrade the diver, which we'll talk about a little later. They all do different things, and depending on what you need at that specific point in your game will depend on which sponsor you might want to tap into.
Now, you don't have to use your sponsor benefit every time you take a turn, but if you're going to, you've got to do it before you finish this phase and activate your diver. Now, to activate your diver, all you do is slide him over to the right, the diver that's on the level that you activated, just to clarify. And once you slide him over to the right, you can activate the ability of whatever diver that is. You have your 4 basic resource divers. one diver specialized in each type of resource. He can only get the type he specializes in. So he's going to take that resource and just add it to the resource storage area on that level of the player board.
The next diver you have at your disposal is your trader, and what she does is she interacts with the market on the main board. A little bit of an econ thing going on here. At the start of the game, you're going to shuffle up some resources and you're going to lay them out on the market according to color. The more resource of any particular color on the market, the cheaper that resource is, and vice versa.
Good old supply and demand.
That's right. So when you activate your trader, you can either buy from the market or sell resources to the market for the market-determined price. It's important to note that the resource you sell has to be on the level in which the trader was activated, and if you buy a resource, it goes on that level as well.
The next diver you have as an option is your spy, who's kind of cool. He has 2 different abilities. You have to choose one of them when you activate him. So he can either take a resource of a corresponding resource diver of an opponent who's on the same level that he's on. So like if somebody has their fuel diver on level 5 and you activate your spy in level 5, you can get a piece of fuel to your level 5. Or he can get a new private contract card. So you have the opportunity, there's the community contracts that are up on the main board that everybody's going for, but this spy allows you to take a private contract that only you know about and only you are going for.
Your explorer is also another diver you have at your disposal, and what he does is he collects reward tokens given out by the corporate sponsors. At the start of the game, you're going to have a bag full of reward tokens that you shake up and then draw out randomly, and you put them on each level next to your corporate sponsors. When you activate your explorer at whatever level he's on, check for one of 2 rewards on the corresponding level on the corporate sponsor track, and you get to choose one of them. And like the corporate sponsors themselves, they do an array of things, or they give you an array of items. Sometimes you can get a battery or a prestige point or a credit or something like that. The cool thing about these is they are double-sided. You have an immediate effect, which is what your explorer collects right away, and then you have a permanent effect that will go on whichever level you activated, and you can get this reward every time you complete a contract on that level for the rest of the game. And while its immediate effect side can have an array of different possibilities, the permanent effect side is going to be either credits or prestige points.
There's one more diver available on your team, but before we talk about her, we're going to take a brief moment to explain some tools and items that you use throughout the game, because they're going to help make her make a little bit more sense. So we already mentioned earlier in the game the credits that you start with. Credits are simply the game's currency, and you use them to pay for items and certain actions. Batteries are another type of currency in the game, but they have a very specific purpose. Well, one of 2 specific purposes. You can either use a battery to swap the position of 2 different divers in the game, or you can use it to keep a diver from having to resurface at the end of his turn.
So that brings us right to our last diver, the engineer, and she works with 2 other members of your team called the mechanic and the hacker, and they kind of work as like a trio. The engineer does one thing and one thing only. She advances your mechanic and your hacker. Your mechanic allows you to use your batteries to move your divers between spaces, and the further advanced he gets, the further your divers are going to be able to travel. Your hacker dictates how long you have to wait before you get to reset your level tiles as you use them, and when you advance your hacker through the engineer, you decrease your waiting time. So here's how level tiles work. Whenever you activate a level, you slide that tile over, you activate the level, you do your thing. You then take that level tile, you flip it upside down, and you put it at the bottom of your board. As soon as a level tile touches whatever space your hacker is on, that's when you get to put all the levels back. At the start of the game, you have to use all of your level tiles before you can reset them. As the hacker advances, he can get to the point where you only have to use 3 of them before they reset, meaning you can use the same level again that much sooner if he's more advanced. So every time you activate that engineer, you have the choice between either upgrading your mechanic or your hacker.
So after you've activated your diver and reaped the benefits, now you have the resurface phase. So the first part of the resurface phase is what Bryce already mentioned, where you take the level tile, flip it upside down, and put it down where your hacker is. Then you have to take your diver tile, the diver that you just activated, and you move him to the very top, and you slide all the rest of them down. So this creates a kind of forced waiting period before you can activate that diver again, because now he's above the surface and has to wait until he's below the surface before he can be reactivated. And it also creates a waiting period before you can use that level again, because now you've taken the level tile away. It can't be activated until there's a tile there to slide over. Now, as we mentioned before, you could spend a battery at this point and keep your diver where he is so that he doesn't have to resurface, but in that case, you still have to remove the level tile.
Now, keeping your diver where he was at, despite not having a level token, can still be advantageous thanks to the use of your X token. At the start of the game, every player gets one X token, and what this token will do is activate a level that doesn't have a level tile on it. But this is where it gets a little bit chaotic for everyone. Once the X token is activated, those corporate sponsors that are level 1 through 5, they shift around a bit. You take the corporate sponsor on level 5 at the bottom, and you move it to the top, and you slide the rest down. Now, it's important to note here that this change happens before you receive your sponsor benefit at that level. So keep that in mind before you use that X token. Once you've activated that level for a second time, your X token moves down to the bottom of your board as if it were any other level tile.
So one of the cool things you can do during the game is to actually upgrade your divers. One of the sponsorship tiles allows you to do this. So when you upgrade a diver, if it's a resource diver, you're adding an additional type of item that he brings you. So he's going to bring you the resource cube and something else, batteries, credits, or single-use X tokens. The other divers, which don't bring you resources but cost money to activate actions, those ones will just cost less once they're upgraded.
Now you're moving all your divers around, you're activating them, you're putting resources on specific levels for the purpose of completing contracts. Now, as Jess said earlier, you have a couple of communal contracts on the main board that everyone can chase and try to get, and you might also have a couple of personal contracts that you've gotten throughout your game. And you complete these contracts by collecting all the resources any particular contract needs on one single level of your player board. So if you have a contract that requires 2 white ones and a green one, you've done that on one of your levels, you turn those resources back into the main supply, and you get the contract card. The contract card will come with a certain number of points. You move your little point marker on the prestige tracker on the main board, and it might also give you some credits or a battery as well.
One important thing to note is that each level has a limited amount of resource storage available. So the levels closer to the surface have fewer storage spaces, and the levels deeper down have more storage spaces. So the higher value contract cards need to be completed on the lower levels. If there's not enough storage space on the level for all the required resources to complete a contract, you cannot complete the contract on that level.
So the game continues like this, everyone taking their turns, collecting their resources, moving their divers up and down until somebody gets 18 points. Once someone gets 18 prestige points, that triggers the end of the game. Everyone else gets one more turn, and at the end of that, whoever has the most points at the end is the winner. If players find themselves with the same score, then the tiebreaker goes to whoever has the most leftover resources on their levels. And if that is tied, then, well, you share the victory.
Sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Now let's talk about a couple of strategies you could use to win the game. Usually one of the first things I try to do is to utilize your engineer to advance your hacker and mechanic. This is going to allow you to do a lot more earlier on in the game, especially being able to repeat different levels, or rather the same level, earlier than you would normally have to.
Right, the hacker and the mechanic can be your best friend, especially if you have a lot of batteries and you want to move your divers up and down. That mechanic will really allow that to happen. One battery can move you up to 4 spaces, I think, if you advance them all the way down. And then with the hacker, like you said, you get your levels back. You can access levels a lot more. It's really important to upgrade those guys. One of the strategies I like to use when I play Otys is to make my levels work for me. Your Explorer allows you to pick up reward tokens out of that bag off the corporate sponsor track, and those permanent effects can really make or break your game. You're talking credits and prestige points that you can collect just for completing a goal right there. So you want to make sure you can get as many of your levels to give you things as you put things there.
Yeah, you're like building an engine almost where your rewards are reaping additional rewards.
Exactly. And if you can do that, I mean, in this game, it can be so tight sometimes that the additional credit or the additional prestige point can make all the difference. So that's why I like doing that one.
Another thing to keep in mind as you play Otys is not to rely too heavily on the sponsors. The sponsor benefits can be really beneficial, and if they're on a level that you need to use anyway, it makes sense. You might as well reap the benefits. But if you're just looking for the sponsor benefits, you might end up with resources all over the place rather than in the levels where you actually need them. So you want to make sure that you're not really relying on those sponsors. Also, the X tokens can really throw you off. If you're relying on a specific sponsor to be able to make your next move and somebody throws down an X token and they all get switched around, then your entire plan has to be reorganized.
Your diver position is definitely more important than where the sponsor may be. And that actually segues into the next tip I wanted to mention. Upgrade your divers strategically. The game does not last long enough for you to be able to upgrade every diver, so you're going to have to look at what your needs are and what type of game you want to play. Maybe you want to make sure your divers can move around freely, upgrade the diver that gives you a battery every time you activate them. Or maybe you want to cause chaos with X tokens, upgrade the diver that gives you an X token, or credits, or whatever.
Personally, I always upgrade my engineer first because it means that she can now be activated for free and get your hacker and mechanic upgraded.
Yeah, there's a couple of divers in here that cost money to use, and when you upgrade them, they get a little cheaper, if not free, which is a good thing.
Another important strategy in taking the lead in this game is to take as many personal contracts as you can. There are only 2 or 3 visible goals.
It depends on the number of players playing, but yeah.
Yeah, so you only have 2 or 3 communal goals up there that everyone's going for at the same time. And by the time you get 3 out of the 4 resources you need, somebody else could have scooped that card up, and then now you have all the wrong stuff for what you're going for. So getting those personal contracts and having something to work towards that everybody else is not also working towards is crucial.
This is actually probably the most important tip when it comes to earning yourself points, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of our games tend to be decided by personal contracts, just coming in with those points at the very last second.
I would also say, too, it's almost equally as important, and I'm sure you can attest to this because of many losses from failing to do it. Don't let your search zones go entirely empty. Always make sure you have some resources on every level you can. Even if you're using that level to complete a contract, if you can leave 1 or 2 left over so you have something else to work with the next time you tap into that level, it's just a good way to make sure you have something to work with when you're working towards your next goal. Alternatively, you can always use your trader to take that resource and turn it in for some credits as well. So, I mean, there's just so many things you can do with not having your resource tracks go empty. It may even be the tiebreaker at the end of the game, so keep that in mind. Don't do what Jessica does. Don't let those things go empty.
And just to clarify, although you've probably figured it out by now, search zones, if we forgot to mention, which I think we did, are what they call the resource storage areas on each of the levels.
Yeah, I think we might have forgotten that, but yes, exactly.
Personally, that strategy is not as important to me, but as Bryce said, I usually lose this game, so maybe don't listen to me as much. One strategy that does work for me, though, or at least it's more of a what not to do, learning from my experience, is you want to make sure that you have enough credits and that you have a way to get credits. If you run out of credits, half your divers can't even be used because they cost money to be activated. So if you don't have a sponsorship tile that's giving you credits or a diver that's upgraded to give you credits, you have to get really creative because there's just going to be a long waiting period where you can't do pretty much anything until you have some credits in your possession.
They're not the easiest thing in this game to get or even hold on to, so definitely find a way to generate a stream of credits for you as you play. Which brings me to the last piece of advice I think we have when it comes to how to win this game. Batteries, batteries, batteries. These things are your best friend in this game. You will need them to keep a diver in place. If you have a contract card that requires 2 of the same resource, you don't want that diver going all the way back up to the top of the board. You want them to stay there. Use a battery to keep them there. Let's say you have a diver that's 3 spaces away and you really need him. Use that battery. Move him around. The more batteries you have, the more you can move your divers around, the better off you are going to be. Do not underestimate your batteries. Have as many of them as you can at all times.
Especially if you don't have credits. You have to have at least one or the other in order to accomplish pretty much anything at all. The history of deep-sea salvage, which is retrieving things that have sunk below a body of water surface, dates back to at least 219 BC in China, where the first recorded salvage was attempted. During these ancient times, salvage divers all over the world utilized heavy rocks to sink as low as 100 feet, as well as long reeds as snorkels to breathe. By the 16th century, the diving bell became the most common method for deep water extraction and exploration. This was a large metal cauldron turned upside down, weighted by lead and dragged straight down. The pressure of the water along the opening at the bottom created a compressed air pocket for the divers to breathe while inside. By 1789, an air supply hose was fitted to the top of the bell, and they were made bigger for larger teams of people to use at once. The diving bell is actually still used to this day, albeit with several modern advancements. It's a far cry from what the divers of the 1700s used. In the 1830s, the first diving helmets were introduced. These large brass helmets with an air supply hose attached to the top would be modified over the course of 100 years to become the classic diving suit we can all picture from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. The diving suit allowed for divers to go deeper and stay underwater far longer, as the suits helped mitigate a lot of pressure from being under the weight of hundreds of feet of water. These suits could weigh up to 600 pounds, depending on how deep a diver had to go. The personal air tank and breathing apparatus, along with the flippers, masks, and wetsuits we associate with diving today, have become a much safer and aerodynamic method of at least shallow water diving. Modern technology such as mechanical arms, radar, magnates, cranes, and robots have also taken over the salvage world by and large today. However, modernized versions of the classic diving suit of the 50s are still utilized from time to time when a more personal touch is needed. There are 4 types of legally recognized salvage categories around the world today, with salvage or extractions now used as an umbrella term that covers rescue, towing, firefighting, and supplying fuel while on or in the water. Naval salvage is any form of salvage having to do with a country's naval forces. Plunder salvage covers the discovery of unowned or unclaimed vessels and treasure. The rules here are pretty simple. So long as no one has claim to it, it's first come, first serve, and finders keepers. The 2 more common types of salvage are contract salvage and pure salvage. Contract salvage is a deal between the owner of the sunken or imperiled property and a salvage team who will negotiate the terms and payment of the salvage operation. Pure salvage is basically contract salvage without the contract. These situations often come about suddenly on the open water. For example, a ship coming to the aid of another ship that is on fire, run aground, or in the process of sinking. The vessel that provided the aid will write up a salvage claim, take it to salvage court, and receive compensation from the rescuee determined by a judge according to the salvage laws in that part of the world. Much of the salvage laws, both written and unwritten, are and have always been based on the honor system, which is kind of impressive in its own way. We won't get too lost in the weeds regarding salvage laws here, but a word to the wise, if you happen to be a captain of a ship in need of aid, be sure to check with your rescuer whether they're there out of kindness or if they're looking to collect on a salvage. It could make all the difference between, oh, thank God someone's come to help us, and holy fucking shit, there's a huge lien on my boat. Salvage diving has always been a fairly dangerous endeavor historically. There are countless records from the 17th and 18th centuries regarding diving bell mishaps and the like. The details of such accidents and deaths at that time were nothing short of brutal and horrific. Although monumentally safer here in the modern day, salvage divers still face a bevy of risks and dangers while underwater. The deepest salvage ever conducted was in 2019 by the U.S. Navy when they pulled a plane out of the Philippine Sea from 18,500 feet down. The most lucrative salvage ever collected was in 2015 when a sunken treasure was recovered at the bottom of the Caribbean, worth a massive total of $22 billion. While technically anyone can perform and collect on any type of salvage, and it can be a highly lucrative field of work, don't quit your job and spend your 401k on a sea barge just yet. Freelance salvage is almost entirely a thing of the past thanks to heavy regulation and an ever-growing pile of safety and insurance laws on the books. This leaves room, for better or worse, for only a country's navy and the biggest and longest-standing salvage operators and companies to operate effectively. So now we come to my favorite part of the show, the part where we get to talk about what we like about the game. And if you couldn't already tell, Bryce and I really like this game. One of the most amazing things about this game is that it's just a really fantastic atmosphere. The concept is really cool. It makes you think strategically, but there's this also, the board is sort of interactive, the way you're sliding the pieces back and forth and up and down, and the levels of the divers, and I know it feels immersive in a way, even though it's not very thematic.
Yeah, I think we forgot to mention that the board itself is kind of raised, and it's got grooves cut into it for the little level pieces to go. So they actually do slide along kind of like a track. And it's just a bit of texture that's added to the game. And like you said, the atmosphere, it's a very thinky kind of game, like it would be if you were organizing a team of divers. Not the strongest theme, but definitely a great atmosphere of thinking strategically. You're absolutely right.
It's fantastic because it's complex, but it's also fluid and intuitive, which makes it accessible, but it's not too easy or too boring for somebody who likes the kind of harder thinking game.
I think if you were an experienced player, this is the type of game you would bust out if you still want to burn your brain a tad, but you don't want to like go too hardcore. But at the same time, if you're more of a newer player and you have kind of a grasp on games already, this is a good push forward into the next level of gaming.
Right. It's not Monopoly. It's the next level.
The thing I like most about this game is the variety between and within each game. You're going to start the game with a different setup every time. Even on the main board, different resources will start at different costs every game. Your divers will start in different positions. Your corporate sponsors will be different every game. And it really just gives it some replay value because no two games are ever going to be the same. And then even within the game, maybe one player is playing with a lot of batteries in mind, or somebody's throwing X tokens down, and so it's causing chaos, and you have to adjust to that. There's a lot of variety here, and I really like that because you can get bored playing games, especially like Euro games. You can get real bored real fast, or at least I do, because it's kind of like the same for the worker here, take a card there. This allows for a lot of mix-up, and it's good.
Yeah, this game does not have a one-size-fits-all strategy. The way that your divers are laid out in the very beginning of the game can have a huge impact on how you're going to achieve success. The first time I ever played the game, the first and only diver I think I activated was the blue one who gives you X tokens. And I used the shit out of those X tokens.
Yeah, it created a lot of chaos. It was nuts.
But I've never upgraded that diver since then, and I don't even use the X tokens that frequently because now I find, now that I sort of understand the sponsor track a little bit more, I find that they're just disruptive and frustrating.
But somebody could like that part. The other thing about the variety is you can customize this game. So the sponsor tiles are double-sided. Let's say you don't like what one of the effects does. You just go, okay, we're just going to use this one only. Or maybe you want to start, everyone selects one diver they want to upgrade and just start the game that way. Or maybe all your divers start at the top.
Yeah, I mean, you could decide how you want to start the divers organized and make a very specific challenge for yourself.
You could, and the best thing about that is you don't have to change the rules in order to do that. Because like a lot of times when you have to make tweaks to games, the rules kind of have to bend. You have to add a house rule. You don't have to do that here.
The only thing you'd really be changing is you're supposed to start with them randomly assigned. So if you're putting them somewhere specific, that's that. But even the sponsor tokens, I think that the rules allow for you to choose whether you want to use the basic or advanced side of every
I think they do
token.
too, yeah. Or maybe you can manipulate the market at the start of the game or force this or that, but you don't need to change the rules. And that's really what I like about that customization. You get a ton of replay value out of this game.
And one awesome thing about that is that for all the replay value you get, it's a bargain. It's only $22 right now, which is amazing. That's a huge bang for your buck. It's not necessarily the replay value of something like Betrayal at the House on the Hill, but it's still, it's simple. It's not a complicated thing where you have to have 5 different rule books, right? Like it's a very simple customization with a lot of different experiences packed into a very inexpensive package.
There are games out there who are going for a lot higher of a price that do and offer a lot less than what Otys has to offer. It's just a steal. If this game appeals to you at all, you're not going to get it for any cheaper. We bought it for, I think, $40 a couple of years ago. Like we said, somebody slept on this game, and now it's super cheap, and this is the time to get it if you're interested.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And just as a kind of like an afterthought, we haven't made any Waterworld jokes yet today. I thought we were, but we didn't. The game takes place after the Earth has basically flooded, so we're talking global warming, and the game doesn't preach it at you. I don't care what your position is on global warming, what your thoughts or feelings are. I don't want politics in my games. And this game had every opportunity to preach it at you hardcore, and they didn't, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't have any idea the opinion of the game designers on global warming, and I like that.
Yeah, it's just a setting that they wanted to use, and in order to use it, the polar ice caps have to melt, so there you go. And it's fine. It's fine. They don't preach at you, and it may not be something that other people notice, but I don't like being preached to about anything personally, so that works for me.
And now we come to my least favorite part of the show, where we have to talk about what we didn't like. But I am enthusiastically ready to start us off, because the thing that I like so very least about Otys is the player boards. They are so warped. They have this amazing concept with the grooves and the pieces that fit in and they slide. But the warped boards, they kind of bend and bow when you sit them on the table. So nothing really fits quite the way that it should. And I mean, I understand for $22, like, what do you expect? But it's just disappointing because you can see how cool it would be if it worked correctly.
Well, remember, we paid almost $40. But she's right. The boards, they come warped. And we aren't the only people to get a copy of a warped game. I've talked to a few people who really like Otys, but their biggest complaint, the board does warp, which is too bad because it's good artwork. It's cool artwork, and like Jess said, the pieces and they slide and everything. But yeah, just be aware of that. Your copy, if you get it, will more than likely be warped.
It's going to drive you crazy if you have any kind of OCD about things being lined up and flat. You're going to go a little bit nuts.
The only other thing I really didn't like personally about this game was because it's whoever gets to 18 points first, it doesn't give you a lot of time to really get your team going. And I know that's kind of the point. You have to make strategic choices. But there's a lot of times during the game where I'm like, God damn it, if I could just upgrade this last diver, then I'll be good. And you don't get that, which I guess for some people is part of the fun, but it feels like it stops just a little too short. Like maybe 20 points would have been better, or 22 points would have been better. With 18, I found that it leaves the trader and the explorer and the spy mostly useless throughout the game, because if your opponents are getting closer to 18, you got to rush your ass over and get to 18 points as well. And so you're not going to do things that set you up for the long game as much as you would if you had more time.
I mean, the trader, the explorer, and the spy can be used for more immediate effects, but it just kind of depends.
Well, it depends on how many credits you have and all sorts of things that, aren't as immediate as your resource divers and batteries.
Yeah, but I definitely see what you mean. I often find the opponent will hit 18 points and I'll feel like I'm just starting to get momentum. Like I've just built my diving engine and I'm ready to get going, and the game is over.
Yeah, there's a sweet spot with games, right? Because you don't want to have your engine going for too long, because then you find yourself just repeating it and you get bored.
Right. When everybody's able to do everything perfect and upgrade everything to the maximum and you have all of that time, then it's just not fun anymore.
Right. But I think Otys just a few points shy of like that sweet spot.
It might have been better, I think, if it was a number of rounds rather than a number of points. But I don't know, because then you might have run into the same problem. I mean, you just don't know how long you're going to need to get your ducks in a row, because it really depends on how discombobulated your stuff is when you start.
That's true. Some of these things take a while to develop, and cutting it short to like 6, 10, 12 rounds might have been too short. I always go back to preferring the number of rounds with games, because I'm a big fan of the game Koi. And not only do they do like a number of rounds, but they also give you like conditions of each round. We have a few games that do that. I'm a big fan of that. The thing is with Otys, though, like we said, house rules can fix whatever issue you might personally have with the game. So a variant could make it possible for you to go, okay, we're going to play the 36 points instead. and it's an easy fix.
Yeah, that's true. You can definitely play to whatever number of points you want and solve that problem pretty easily.
Now, the last problem that I have with this game, and this is probably just me, the game can start to drag ass a little bit once you get into the 3 and 4 player category. 2 players, I found it to be a perfect speed, but with 3 and 4 players, it does slow down a bit. Maybe you don't mind. I personally do, so I thought it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, and I know you must be thinking, how could it possibly be too quick and too slow at the same time? Well, it's like you wait forever and ever, but at the end, you still haven't accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, like you don't have enough time in your own personal game, but there's a lot of time of waiting between your last turn and your next turn. Because it's a thinky game and people need to adjust their guys, and maybe somebody used an X token to move something around, so now somebody's turn's all messed up and they need to think it through. You can find yourself waiting a bit, and if that's something that you don't like to do like me, be aware.
I guess that's really a caution to the genre more than the game itself.
Yeah, for sure.
We made it through the hard part, and now it's time to just share some other thoughts about the game. While we were researching for this episode, we looked at a lot of people's feedback and opinions about the game. We're thinking maybe part of the reason it's been overlooked is because of the sponsor tiles being swapped when you use an X token. That kind of chaos can really throw people for a loop, and based on the feedback we've seen, a lot of people didn't like it.
I would say that personal goals and being selective of what sponsor tiles you want to use before you start the game would be a good remedy to that chaos. But it's funny that you say that, because when we took a look at other people's reviews and complaints about the game, other people thought it was too Euro-y. They said that there's not enough player interaction, there's not enough things going on that interact with everybody else. They just felt like they were playing their own separate game. I guess you can't please everybody. It's like one of those situations.
I think it's because people thought it was going to be more thematic than it is. Looking at the box cover, it looks very cool, but very thematic. It's deep underwater. There's all these really cool things you're seeing. And when you play the game, you don't really see any of the cool stuff they're finding underwater. The contracts are very vague. They're sort of pictures of nothing.
Yeah.
So I can kind of see what people are getting at.
Yeah, and the resources aren't actually resources. They're just colorful cubes, and there's no minis. And so I can get where people would say, like, they feel thrown off because the box indicated that there might be more theme. But you know it's a Euro game. When do Euros ever have theme? Like, honestly, Euros are not known for their theme.
But it would be cool if it were more thematic. I mean, the concept behind this game is really freaking awesome. And I would have loved to see some more theme in it and just see what that would look like.
It absolutely begs for theme. Just the cover alone. Like, it begs to be a thematic game, but I think you would get an entirely different game.
I think you might be right. And it would probably increase the cost a lot.
Well, no, because what would you have? You would have minis. You would have a big main board. You would have those minis moving on the map. You would have resource cards, maybe. You would have things that you could, like, block your other opponents with. You might have situations that come up that, like, destroy your rig. It would be a whole different game.
It would be a whole different game. So maybe we're just doing that thing that gamers do where we're seeing something cool and wishing for something else that would also be cool, but really isn't the same thing at all.
Yeah, we have a bad, I say they, no, we have a bad habit of that. But it's a fun exercise, you know, what the game could have been. But I think it's fine the way it is. I don't have a huge problem with Otys. I enjoy playing it whenever we get it to the table. Theme or no theme. Yeah. Kevin Costner or no Kevin Costner. In a world covered in water, Kevin Costner is searching for salvage.
But there are no little girls with tattooed maps on them.
None. So now that we've had a whole episode to experience Haze Gray by Old Salt Coffee, Jess, what did you think?
I really want to like this coffee because I love the company. I love what they stand for and their mission and just how dedicated they are to that. But it's a little bit too acidic for me. It leaves me with a sour aftertaste that I just can't get behind. It's not so bad that it's undrinkable. In fact, I am drinking it right now. I'm going to finish this cup, but it would not be my first choice.
I am opposite of you. I like this cup of coffee in my hand a lot. I don't mind the acidity. I think it works really well as kind of like a counterbalance to the dark roast half of this medium dark roast hybrid. I think it counters that deep, earthy taste you get from the Colombian bean because it's a single source coffee. You're only getting Colombian beans in this. And I think it kind of just balances that out, counters it a little bit, and you get this nice mix of earthy and chocolatey, and then you get that a little kick of acidity. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a little kick of acidity, maybe. And this is something I always think about, like maybe our taste buds just have a completely different threshold for what feels like a little or a lot with different kinds of flavors. Because sometimes you'll say something is really salty, and to me it doesn't seem like it is. And in this case, you say this is a little kick of acidity, and in my opinion, it's like, I don't know, like the flood, like the Great Flood, but it's all acid rain in your mouth.
Well, to be fair, and we should say you and I are both dark roast to bold roast coffee drinkers primarily.
Yeah.
We prefer the darker roasts. Every time we touch into medium or light, I think for both of us, we notice the acidity more than somebody who is used to the medium roast, who's used to the light roast. I think for someone who's used to medium, they're going to get a lot more body and earth in this cup of coffee than they'd be used to. And so that might be a whole different experience for them. For us, because we're not used to the acidity that comes with light and medium roasts, we taste it more.
Well, I mean, I might be a little extra sensitive to it because I can feel the acidity too when it's coming back up my throat. So
Yeah, no, you do have heartburn pretty bad. That's true.
So maybe if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't be so sensitive to it. But since it is, the acidity is just a little bit intense for me.
I wonder if that has to do with the fact that you drink all your coffee with creamer in it, because this has been described as a sipping kind of coffee. So I don't think you're supposed to take like big, large sips. And I think when you have creamer in it, because you got that flavor of the, what is that, hazelnut?
Yeah, it's hazelnut.
So now it's a little easier to drink down because it's a little sweeter, but then you have all this acid, whereas I've been drinking this black primarily. And so I'm doing little sips and I'm taking in the aroma. You almost drink it like a tea because there is a lot of aroma in this coffee. I think that might be the difference between you and me and why you notice the acidity more is because you're taking more in at one time, whereas I'm taking less.
It could be, yeah. And to be fair, I did try it without creamer, to make a fair judgment, but I did just have the one sip. So maybe if I was continually taking in the aroma and the smaller sips, I might not have such a strong reaction to that acid.
It's a fair observation to make, though, for people who might want to try this. Somebody who is into dark roast and might be going, let me dip my toe into medium a bit. You will notice the acid more. I do think it provides a good contrast from that deep, earthy, bold flavor you're going to get from the Colombian bean, because with Colombian beans, you get a lot of earth. You want something to counter that. There are hints of chocolate and caramel in this coffee, not so much in the flavor for me as in the aroma. So all that's left in that dark roast for me anyway is that boldness, and I need that contrast of something else, and the acidity provides it as long as you're sipping it, slowly, breathing it in and enjoying that cup for a lot longer than you would, I think, if you put creamer in it.
I actually like the boldness and the body and the earthiness that you get from the Colombian beans, but I don't know. I guess I'm a dark roast purist.
Fair.
So to me, it's perfect the way it is. I don't need that crisp acidity there, but maybe for someone else with a less sophisticated palate.
Oh,
no,
look
just
at you.
kidding.
No, I think when you do hybrids, it's tricky to get right. And even though I think they did do it right, everyone's taste buds are different. Everyone's going to experience it differently. So I think the best thing you can do as a coffee roaster is just know your chemistry when it comes to coffee and go, okay, what is the best generalized brew we can mix here with this hybrid? What's going to chemically look the best on paper? What's going to be the most pleasing when it comes to the aroma? And then from there, you either like it or you don't.
Yeah, you can't please everybody.
But let me ask you this, because this coffee is supposed to be highly caffeinated, or at least compared to all their other roasts. Did you feel that extra surge of caffeine? Did you feel the buzz when you drank this?
Not particularly, but to be fair, I drink so much coffee that I usually don't really feel the caffeine. So
like your baseline's at like a 7?
Yeah, so I don't really know if I'm the best person to ask that question to.
I'm the wrong person to ask as well, not because I drink more coffee than water, like somebody across from me over here, but I've never been one to respond to stimulants much. Like, I don't know why. It's just I don't. Every once in a while, a cup of coffee will jolt me and I get all shaky, but it's rare. So as far as the caffeine content goes, we're probably the wrong people to ask, unfortunately. They say there's a lot of caffeine in there, and we'll take them at their word. I do want to say, outside of the coffee, though, I started following Old Salt on Facebook, and I was checking out their website just to see what they were all about. I'm really impressed with the way they talk about naval history, because they're always posting things and videos that go, hey, on October 3rd, 1937, this happened. I like being able to learn things like that I otherwise wouldn't have ever looked into.
Yeah, and I love that it just matches with their mission and their name and the whole thing. It's also cohesive. I mean, it seems a little bit weird, like, what does the coffee have to do with the Navy? But Old Salt, right? That old naval sailor who's preserving the stories and the history and passing them along, that's really what they're about. The coffee is just almost how they fund it.
You know me, keeping history alive is important. I think it's probably one of the most important things we can do as a society and culture. And regardless of how you feel about the armed forces, there is something to be said about someone who signs up to do that. I never did it, but I know people who have. And again, regardless of how you feel, it does say something. So I think it's cool that there are companies out there who are commemorating that and honoring that.
Absolutely. It's a huge sacrifice to make. And I personally believe in sharing personal stories. I think it's a huge part of human history and the human experience, not just large historical events. And I feel like what better humans to share their stories than the ones who have made these huge, brave sacrifices?
All the better if you can do that over a cup of coffee.
That's right. And that's kind of the best of both worlds right there.
I agree. So I would say about Old Salt's Haze Gray, if you are a medium coffee drinker who wants to experience something a little bolder, or a dark roast coffee drinker who kind of wants to see what it's like to have that boldness countered with a little bit of medium style acidity, this is definitely one to try. I enjoy this coffee a lot.
It is not my favorite, but if you want to support an awesome company with a really cool mission and you don't mind a little kick of acidity at the end, then it's for you. Also good, apparently, if you are a sailor on the night watch trying to get through your shift.
Because that caffeine, which we didn't feel, but we're taking their word for it, it's going to keep you awake and alert. So check it out. Hey, it's Bryce here with Just the Tip, brew and mixology suggestions for a better drinking experience. And today, we're going to do something a little different. If Haze Gray by Old Salt Coffee has piqued your interest, I still have a tip for you, but you'll be able to apply this one to just about any coffee you'd like. A recent and rather sizable study has come out that suggests how coffee might actually be really good for you, so long as you drink it in a certain way. Many coffee lovers have jokingly, or maybe not so jokingly, said that they need coffee to live, and there might be something to this. Now, of course, you don't have to take my advice. Everyone likes their brews in their own way. That's why this is Just the Tip. According to NBC News, the Annals of Internal Medicine published a study last month that suggests, and this is their headline, not mine, drinking coffee may be linked to lower risk of death. Now, before we go any further, let me just point out the absurdity of that headline. The risk of death is, has been, and always will be 100%. Sorry if this is shocking news to you, but you are indeed one day going to die, and that is completely unavoidable. And honestly speaking, if you needed a random guy who hosts a podcast about board games to tell you that, I think maybe you should reevaluate your life a bit. Anyway, a better way to say this would be coffee may reduce the risk of early death. This study followed more than 170,000 people in the UK over the course of a 7-year period starting in 2009, all between the ages of mid-50s to mid-60s. Taking into account things like income levels, ethnicity, sex, smoking habits, and fitness, this study found that those who drank between 2.5 to 4.5 cups of coffee a day produced 29% fewer death certificates in those 7 years than those who did not. Now, here's the major caveat among many. Those coffee drinkers who outlived their counterparts specifically drank black coffee, regular or decaf, using a teaspoon of sugar or less in each cup. not creamer or other types of sweeteners, but specifically sugar. While this study is interesting, all you caffeine addicts shouldn't expect to see your centennial just yet. Researchers have admitted that this 29% chance of living longer could come from just about anything. There are many other things to consider besides one's death certificate and lifestyle, which this study did not do in great detail. The health effects of coffee have been studied seriously for almost a century now, and nothing too conclusive has ever really come from it. There are so many biologically active compounds within the brew that it's difficult to really measure or even track. This will likely continue to be the case for a while, but what has changed largely thanks to studies like this is the concept of daily amounts of coffee being bad for you. I remember as a kid in the late 90s, not all that long ago, hearing that too much coffee can give you a stroke or heart attack. Like the food pyramid, this seems to have been largely debunked, so at the very least, for all you coffee fanatics out there, there's no guarantee that your 5th cup of coffee is helping you not die early, but it definitely doesn't seem to be hurting your chances. This is, of course, if you don't overload that coffee with too much sweet stuff. So remember, black with a teaspoon of sugar or less. So for all you Starbucks fans out there who are into that Venti Double Mocha Soy Skinny Frat Vanilla Latte with minimal ice, almond milk, chocolate drizzle upside down with extra foam for Britney spelled with 2 E's horse shit, well, this study doesn't apply to you. And that's not even coffee anymore at that point. As for the rest of us, we'll drink up, I guess. And why not make one of those 4 cups a day Haze Gray by Old Salt? My name is Bryce, and this has been Just the Tip.
That's all we have for today. It was a long one, so thanks for sticking with us, but I'm really glad we finally gave Otys the deep dive that it deserves.
Holy good God, you did it again.
What? I just said deep dive.
It did deserve a close examination, and we did it. If no one else was going to do it, we did it, and now I'm happy.
That's right. Me too.
Next week, we will be back to discuss the topic of skinny cocktails and quote-unquote healthy booze in general. Is this something that even exists? Can it exist? Well, we will unbox it and find out.
Thanks again for listening. If you haven't yet, go ahead and give us a like or a subscribe wherever you listen or follow. And as always, we would love some 5-star reviews. And if you really want to help us out, go ahead and hit that share button or just copy and paste the link, old school style. Just share us with your friends.
All of them.
Every single friend that you have, all 4 of them. Please.
No, that's my friends list, not their friends.
You're right. You probably have way more friends than we do. So do that. It would help us out a lot.
Yes, it would. So until next time, that is Jessica. I've been Bryce. We are the Game and Drink Connoisseurs, and we will catch you later.